Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Ocean Rock Stars with Tom Neymat. Today, I have a very special guest, Joe Milligan. Joe is the co-CEO at Beginnings Treatment Centers, and he's a director at South Coast Counseling. Both of these programs focus on detox, residential treatment, and some outpatient treatment as well, but really with a high emphasis on inpatient treatment. He's been doing this for over 10 years, and he has, I believe, next week, 30 years sober. So he has a depth and breadth in the industry. In addition to that, he has two young kids who just finished high school and college recently. So he has a pretty deep understanding of what kids are going through as far as mental health and addiction-related issues, both of our teens and young adults. So today, we want to learn more from Joe, both from his experience, his perspective, and sharing some of his wisdom with us. Welcome, Joe.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing well. Good to have you on the show.
Good to see you, Tom.
So Joe and I have known each other for almost 10 years now,
Yeah.
so we have a good relationship. Joe, we've talked about this, but it would really be interesting kind of as a starting point to go over, your own sobriety, how what ultimately was the breaking point from you getting sober and staying sober. And so let's start with that. What was the main event in your life that you went from, being an alcoholic to finding sobriety and then maintaining sobriety?
Well, that's a long story. I mean, it wasn't any one single event. It never really is.
Right.
I mean, I started drinking. I've told this story 1,000 times, but, I don't remember my first drink, but I do remember my first drunk.
Right.
I was a man in uniform. I was the leader of men. I was the patrol leader of the Cheetah Patrol of Troop 5 of the Boy Scouts of America. I was about 12 years old. And I remember growing up. I grew up right here in Newport. I was at the Newport Elementary and Horace Ensign and Harbor High. So I grew up right here. And I never felt like I fit in anywhere. I always felt like I was not in the right place. I felt like because I grew up on the peninsula where the regular houses, even though they're right off the ocean, I thought I was in the slums because I wasn't on Lido Island. It's a disease of perception. And that's the way I felt. I felt like I was the outsider. People tell me I was a pretty popular kid, but I don't remember it that way. I don't remember thinking myself that way. And I tried to do everything. I played football. I played Pop Warner football. I played Pee Wee baseball. I played Little League. I was in the Boy Scouts, the Cub Scouts, the Boy Scouts, DMLA, all these things trying to find a way to fit in. And I never really did. At the time that I was in the Boy Scouts, I was probably 12 years old. I might have been 13. I was a freshman in high school, I'm sure, when we did this. But I was supposed to be running a meeting. I had my uniform on. I had my boots were polished. My brass was all shiny. I was looking like a Boy Scout. And a friend of mine called me up and said, my parents are out of town. We're going to open the liquor cabinet. Mm-hmm. And I'm supposed to be at a meeting, running the meeting. And I don't remember there being a second thought as to where I was going to go. I just ran right over there. And I defiled the Boy Scout uniform that night, learned how to drive the porcelain bus. It was fun. I mean, I had a good time. And the funny part about it was that a bunch of my friends were there, the old friends that I'd grown up with. And one of my good friends said, my dad's going to kill me, I got to go. So he walks out. And right there on the peninsula in Newport, he walks out. 2 minutes later, knock at the door. He's there at the door. My mother's got him by the collar. And she's standing there and says, where's my son? Now, you're going to ask, how did she know I was there? Well, the Boy Scouts are calling, He's supposed to be here running a meeting. Where the heck is he? Mm-hmm. So she figured it out pretty quickly and took me home, threw me in bed, said, you're just like your dad. So, and I knew it was good. I knew I discovered something new. I knew I was a different person. I knew that something had changed fundamentally in my life. And it did. I found my people. I was a freshman in high school. I had a good time in high school, really. Not at the time. I mean, it still was not fitting in very well. But I was on the football team. And then I was on the wrestling team in the middle of the year. And I was on the track team in the spring, just trying to find a way to fit in. And all of a sudden, I found my people. And I suddenly fit in. I was still, trying to lose some weight. I was a chubby kid. And then... But I found all my people, and things were pretty good my first couple of years. But something happened in the middle of my sophomore year. I lost a lot of weight. I apparently got much better looking because suddenly I was having a lot of fun. Mm-hmm. And my last 2 years in high school were excellent, really, really good. And I was also I was still a good student. I was drinking every day. I was, all the football team was smoking pot. You know, we just all did that back in that day. Sorry, coach. But we all were. And we just did that. That was the way it was in the 70s. You know, it's the early 70s, mid 70s. And I was in a special class for 2 years, 4 hours a day, for kids who wanted to be doctors. You know, we had to test into the class. You had to have the GPA for it. We had to take a test. It was hard. It was tough to get into that class. But once we were in, we were the intellectual elite of the school. We could do anything we wanted. You know, we were the smart ones. We were going to be the doctors. We all just drank and partied, but you know, I think 2 of them became doctors. But it was good. I graduated and went to USC. I mean, it was really a good time. We could do anything we wanted. Nobody checked to see if we were in school. We could leave anytime we wanted and come back. So it was fun. I arranged my life.
No one checked the IDs back then, right?
Well, we had fake IDs. We had good ones too. They were usable back then. But I also had a night class at OCC, so I had an OCC card, so I could say, no, I'm not in high school. I go to college.
Right.
But you know, it was a lot of fun. But I can't even tell that story. I can't put it down.
Well, I mean, let's kind of fast forward to like when did it become from hey, I'm just drinking every day to hey, this is creating
this is
problems.
I'll tell you. I had arranged my life so that I could drink and use drugs the way I wanted to. I'd already done that by the time I was out of high school, and I went to USC, straight to USC. And at USC, I'd planned on going and majoring in pre-med. I was going to be a doctor, and I took an organic chemistry course. And I found out that my own organic chemistry experiments were really interfering with my ability to study that. So I quit the pre-med program and tried to get into the film school. They wouldn't let me in because I was already a freshman. You got to plan on that years before you get in. But I took all the film classes I could, and I got the opportunity to produce concerts on campus. And I did. This was the late 70s. Punk was coming in, ska was coming in, new wave was there's all this new music. And USC is an influential school. My best friend was two years ahead of me. He had he ran the radio station, and I produced concerts, and we got to do a lot. We got together. The record companies recording us. They wanted us to play their new bands on the campus and on the radio to build that college market. So it was a good time to be doing that stuff. And they would send us booze and drugs, and they'd send us limousines, and we're a couple of students, you know. What happened was he was 2 years ahead of me. He graduated, went on to work for a big record company, and they hired me to do college promotion. I was 19, maybe 20, wasn't old enough to drink yet. And I'm flying around the country with these bands, riding in the tour bus, putting them on at colleges all around the country. And and I was the one who brought the booze and drugs with me, you know, and it was a time where that stuff happened. And went into the record business, and I drank the way I wanted to, and I used drugs the way I wanted to, and it was okay then. I remember what happened though in the 80s. Suddenly this stuff came around called freebase, and it wasn't crack cocaine, it was handmade, and I did it with everybody else. I cooked it up with everybody else. I puffed it up with everybody else. But I saw these very wealthy people, very famous people, who lost everything to this. I mean, they lost their homes, they lost their cars, they lost careers at studios and big record companies. And they just couldn't stop doing it. And I discovered at the time, and I didn't understand it in the context, but I discovered at the time that I had the same cravings they did when I was using the drugs. But when they ran out, I didn't need to hawk my car. I could drink half a bottle of scotch, and all the other cravings went away. Them, if they drink at all, then they had to go call the dealer and have more Coke. Me, I drank, and everything was fine. There was something different about the way alcohol affected me. There was something different about the way I was affected by it. And then around in 1988, I was 21 at the time, and just really old enough to drink legally. And a bunch of people started getting sober. They started drinking Perrier. They started hiking Runyon Canyon and taking care of themselves. So I said, I'll do that. Good idea. Let's clean up my act. So I quit drinking. Never tried to quit drinking before in my entire life.
How old were you then?
Maybe 21.
Okay.
Yeah, I was probably still 20 because I turned 21 late in '88, and
So like, okay, I've been drinking since I was in my young teens.
Yeah.
Since I was in high school, and now, let's try this sober life.
Let's try this sober life. Didn't work. I went to AA meetings. I tried to do it, but the first time I tried to stop drinking, I started feeling sweaty and my stomach hurt and I was shaking all over, and I thought I had the flu. I had no idea what withdrawal was. I didn't understand it because I'd never tried to stop drinking before. I was going through withdrawal and I didn't know.
How much were you drinking every day at that point?
Oh, I don't know how much. I mean, I was drinking a good bottle. I never was a beer drinker or wine drinker. I mean, I was drinking scotch, a lot of it, a good, bottle a day probably. So I'd wake up in the morning with a drink. I had Glenlivet. I like Glenlivet a lot. I had a bottle right by my bed.
Right.
I mean, I kept the bottle and
so a bottle a day.
Yeah, about a bottle a day at the time. I was pretty young, but I kept the bottle by my bed, and I'd take a shot before I went to, not a shot, I'd take a big slug before I went to sleep or passed out, and as soon as I woke up, that was the first thing I drank before I had coffee. And I lived that way for a long time, for a couple of years. And I'd never tried to stop before, and it was terrible. So a lot of people got sober then. And they were mostly people who'd been doing freebase, mostly people who were doing a lot of coke. And it was this big group of people who were all living differently than I was. And that's when I felt out of it again. I felt like I was somebody who didn't belong again. That was a weird feeling for me at the time. And I spent from kind of late 88 to early 94, going in and out of AA, going in and out of relationships, going in and out of jobs. I watched my life slip away.
Right.
Over that time, watched everything get lost, and then I decided around 1990 that it was L.A. The business was killing me, so I left, came down to Newport, went back to my mother's house where I belonged.
Right.
And
how old were you then?
I must have been
mid-20s.
Mid-20s, yeah.
Okay.
And I came back down to Newport, and I moved into my mother's house and lived there. And I, again, went to the AA meetings and tried to stop, but I also went to the bars and drank and chased girls. And that was a pretty active part of my life at the time. But it was killing me. And I was building this townhouse complex. You've heard this story, actually, because I've told it to all the clients. I have a townhouse complex on Victoria Street at Canyon Drive. It's a big, beautiful, salmon-colored townhouse complex. I built that. I built that with a team. We built that. My dad owned the land. We built this whole place up, and it's a beautiful place. I mean, they're really nice townhomes. I had a whole team that was running me. I told you about Mehdi, the guy who... Mehdi. He was the supervisor and worked for me, and he was the nicest guy in the world. He had actually gone from Iran to Germany and gotten himself a master's in engineering. He worked for Volkswagen. He built a Volkswagen plant in Germany. But Germany was not a nice place for somebody like that. He ended up taking his German wife and moving here and starting himself over. So he's working for me. He's way overqualified, but he was the nicest guy in the world. He was the first guy I knew that took me to Persian food. That was a blast. But he took care of me when I was there. He took care of getting things done right, and he would come to me and say, "Joe, how are you doing today?" So, "Well, I'm doing great." He says, "I think you're not doing so great. We have an inspection, maybe I should talk to the inspector. Would that be all right?" Yeah.
Right.
And he took care of me.
So he could see that you were
drunk as hell,
under the influence. Yeah.
And I've told the story too that I was drinking 2 liters of 100 proof Smirnoff a day. I was drinking half-liter bottles. I'd get them at the liquor store. I'd show up. I couldn't sleep anyway, so I was the earliest person there at the site. And I had these flask-shaped half-liter bottles. I was drinking 4 or more of those a day, and I was hiding them because I didn't want anybody to see them. So I'd put them, instead of into the trash, I'd go slide them inside the walls of the place. And so there's hundreds of bottles in the walls of this place. It's still standing. I show it to the clients all the time, and I tell them the story. But when I was selling the place, and I was drunk when I was selling the place, I got a real estate broker's license to sell the place, and I did. I mean, I sold the places eventually, but I'd go show them off, and there'd be a little truck rumbling by, or maybe a little earthquake. Somebody'd go, "There's a chandelier. I hear a chandelier. I don't know where it is, so I can't find it." It's the bottles and the walls rattling.
Right. And
they're still there to this day. But I lost everything there too. We had another major real estate recession. In 93, I guess it was, there was a big real estate recession. The banks got all the, they're holding the thing. They're about to come take it back. And I was losing everything. So I was planning my suicide. I was planning to die. I couldn't stop drinking. I couldn't,
So at that point, what made you even start thinking about having those suicidal thoughts? What was it? I mean, I know your story, but what specifically changed?
I'll tell you what it was. It was that I'd lost hope that I would have anything better, ever.
Got it.
I'd lost hope that I was going to have a real life of any kind. I'd lost hope that I was going to be able to sell this place. I was going to lose it all. I was going to be at my mother's house forever, and then she was going to die, and I wasn't going to have any way to live. And I was going to be on the streets soon. This is the way I catastrophized everything.
Right.
But that's what a drunk does when they're in their cups. And I was miserable. And I would just think about these things and drink and go to the Newport Club on 32nd Street in Newport. And I'd go and I'd stand on a bridge. And I'd look over this bridge. And I'd plan my suicide. I'd just stand on the bridge and think about suicide. The bridge was the bridge of Lido Island. It's 10 feet over the water. You know, it's not suicide central. But that's how I felt. So one night, February 20th, 1994, I was standing out there looking at the water, thinking about how I was going to kill myself. I had a little .32 caliber pistol that I had for a long time, and my hand was shaking so much. I was thinking maybe I could just duct tape it to my head. If I lean way out and shoot myself in the head and then fall in the water, I'll probably drown. So I was trying to figure out some way to do that. I really thought about it that much. But I walked back to my mother's house because I wasn't going to do it that night. I didn't have anything with me. And I walked past the Newport Club at the Sunday night meeting, coffee break. So they're standing out in the street. They're smoking, they're drinking coffee. And they knew me. I'd been in there 1,000 times. So somebody came and grabbed me, took me inside, sat me down, gave me half a cup of coffee because my hands were shaking so much I couldn't hold a whole cup of coffee. And some pretty woman came up and talked. I don't remember what she said or what she looked like. I just remember thinking she was pretty. And she told me how I felt. For the first time, I connected with that. For the first time, I actually got what it meant that these were my people. And from that day, I stayed sober.
And I mean, you said you'd been there, you've been there 1,000 times. I mean, what was it that she said, or what was it in that moment that you were willing to hear that, was different than before?
That's not something I can answer, and it's not something anybody can really answer. It's a confluence of things. That's one of the things I talk about, too, a lot with the clients, is that something is going to shift. I was there 1,000 times, but I was resisting it.
Right.
I wasn't listening. I wasn't doing anything.
Yeah.
I was resisting the whole thing, but suddenly my resistance broke, and something shifted inside me. Something had just happened suddenly, and suddenly I loved being there. Suddenly I wanted to be there. I wanted to be a part of this whole thing, and this is what happens. We see it all the time with the clients. There's some that come in the biggest pains in the butt in the world, and we've got a couple of them working for us now, and I've seen it. They can be the worst client, but they have that shift, and then they come to work for us, and it's great because nobody can get away with anything. They've done it already, and they know the place like the back of their hands, and it just works. But something shifted in me, and that's what I try to tell people is going to happen if they're really feeling bad. Abraham Lincoln said a long time ago that most people are just about as happy as they make up their mind to be. And I made up my mind to enjoy it. And you know Mike Mack. You've met Mike Mack.
Yeah.
He was I shouldn't use his last name on the podcast. I'm sorry. But he was my best friend. We were about the same age, about the same level of sobriety, and we mopped floors together.
Right.
Mike in. We mopped floors together, and we went on. People would just come to us and say, hey, get in the car. And we got in the car. And we went to Santa Barbara. We went to San Diego. We went to Bakersfield a couple of times to go to meetings, and a bunch of us. And we stayed sober. We spent the first couple of years doing that together. And there was a group of us. And most of them are still here. Most of them are still sober. Most of them are still in my life. We're still very close. And that's a good thing. You know people like that for such a long time. And you know every intimate detail about their lives. And it's a wonderful way to live. But we did that. And the thing I've been trying to impart to people is just get in the van.
Right.
Don't ask questions. We're going to go to a meeting. We're going to go do something together, and we're going to stay sober tonight. So just come with us. Get in the van. And they argue with us. You know that. They go, I don't want to. So if they get in the van enough times, they're going to want to get in the van. And that's what I love to see. And
it's taking that first step. I mean, I think one thing, just to kind of quickly recap, is, you started drinking at the age of 12, 13, young teen. You drank your way through high school, having a lot of fun, but it caught up to you when you were in college. You couldn't finish college. You kind of dropped out of your pre-med. You were kind of headed in a really high escalated position. Your father was, you mentioned this, but your father was a physician. Excuse me. And so you kind of knew where you were headed, but then you got derailed, right? This alcohol, this addiction, this alcoholism got in the way, and then it got to the point where it was so low that you were standing at the bridge with a gun to your head, and for whatever reason you didn't pull the trigger that night.
I didn't have the gun with me at the time.
Well,
that's okay.
It's you've had it.
You bring it sometime.
Yeah, I mean, you had gotten to the point where you had already kind of thought through that whole process, and we're kind of in that dark moment. but then on the way back, you met with this person and you kind of got dragged in. And so I think, that's, we talk about rock bottom, and we talk about like what are the multiple factors that go into somebody being willing and ready to surrender. Because you're ultimately saying, look, when you're talking to the clients, you're saying, hey, look, get out of your own way, right? And I think that's the biggest problem we all have in dealing with, how to actually sustain sobriety. And, in our program, and whether it's in your own personal life, it's, okay, I need to take that first step. And the first step is really getting out of your own way. And it's always the person that you meet or that you listen to at that time that's going to resonate with you, because now you've given that window of hope and window of opportunity for somebody to actually help you. Because you said you had been there thousands of times. People were trying to help you every single time you were there, right? But you just weren't ready, and you thought you knew better, and you thought that, hey, these guys don't know what they're doing. I'm going to go out there and drink and I can function, right? Mm-hmm. And it wasn't until you did lose everything, that you said, look, I need to get out of my own way. And I think that's kind of a big takeaway here, is that, although you can't you can't put your finger on what was that one event or what was that one thing, it's all of those things in combination getting you to a point where you just felt like, I can't do this by myself. And I think that's what the program, and that's what, whether you're in rehab or whether in your AA or whether you're in any other groups that really cultivate that atmosphere of recovery and of improving your mental health. So let's kind of fast forward. We
will. I want to touch on that for a second.
Which one?
This is the whole process of getting out of your way.
Okay, go ahead.
Way.
Yeah,
one of the things
tell us. So let's kind of start with this. So, Joe, tell us about what it takes to open yourself up and really get out of your own way and allow people to help you. People like yourself who are reaching out and saying, hey, I can help you. What do you tell the clients and the families out there to allow you and other professionals to help?
Willingness. That's one of the things that we talk about. In the program that I belong to, they talk about that a lot, but that's true. I mean, it's completely true. You have to be willing to do things that you don't think are going to work, because you just have to accept they worked for somebody else. There's a couple of things. There's the willingness to try something you've never tried before. Even though it sounds like a lot of work, it really is not. I mean, staying drunk is a lot harder than doing the things we ask them to do.
Right.
Getting drugs is a lot harder than what we ask them to do. There's an old Cheech and Chong movie. I don't know if you ever looked at them, but there's an old from the 80s Cheech and Chong movie where they're driving around trying to find some pot. One of them, they're all sorts of misadventures. It's a comedy movie, very funny.
I've seen it.
One of them looks at the other one and says, drugs don't kill you, man. It's looking for drugs that kills you. I love that. But it was true. And, it's willingness. It's willingness is one thing. To listen to do something you didn't think would work. The other thing is connection. The other thing is understanding. For me, I don't know what it was. I couldn't give you the words that were used. And I don't know what words I've used in the past that's made people change. But something will click in their heads, and it clicked in my head, that says to me, this person understands me. This person, we don't feel understood in this whole thing. We think that everybody misunderstands us, our family misunderstands us. We think that nobody really gets who we are. It's an affectation, really. People understand. We're drunks, or drug users, but they're not supposed to understand why we do it.
Right.
Because they can't understand why we do it. They can't understand. There's nothing in their experience that allows them to understand why we would do the self-destructive things that we do.
Right.
And so they can't really understand. When somebody says, I know why you did that. I understand because I did the same thing. I felt the same way. And you really believe that.
Right.
You understand that somebody was there and done what you've done and has gone further and they're doing okay now. Then it's that connection, that understanding that this is my people.
Right.
This is who I want to be.
Right.
Because they used to be who I am, and I don't want to be who I am anymore.
Right.
It's very quick when it happens. It's not something you can work into it. They call it a spiritual experience of the educational variety, but usually it's pretty quick. I've seen it happen with people just all of a sudden. All of a sudden you like being there. All of a sudden you like the people you're around, and then if you keep doing it, you'll get better. And if you keep doing the things you don't want to do, eventually you're going to want to do them. And that's the way it happens. I was talking about this before, we have sayings and cliches, but they're cliches because they're true. They've been around since 1930, you know? They say, how long do I have to go to these meetings? You have to go until you want to go. Then you don't have to go anymore.
Right.
And that sounds stupid, but
That
it's
sounds
true.
good, yeah.
It's you realize it when you suddenly realize you want to go. And everybody does, you know, who stays. They realize, I want to be there. I can't wait to get to my meeting tonight.
Right.
You know, and that's a funny thing to think about when you first say, oh my God, what happened to me? Where am I?
Now you're rolling up your sleeve,
Yeah.
you're volunteering, you're,
Yeah. Well, you're talking to somebody else.
Right.
One of the other things that I love about this is we have a lot of real heroes, great speakers, great writers, people who've done, who really do connect to a lot of people.
Uh-huh.
There's people who've done this, and they really connect to a lot of people, and a lot of them have passed on, many have passed on. But the funny thing is that they were just saying something they learned from somebody else, and we're hearing them and we're passing it on again. It's an unbroken chain of people who
Right.
are doing about the same thing for about the same reason, but when somebody is gone, somebody just very dear to me just died a few months ago. Old man, he was just a good guy. And I was telling his family, I said, they don't really leave us ever, because when I'm talking to somebody else and I say something to them that I heard from him, from Dave, when I say that same thing to somebody else, I can hear his voice. I can feel his presence. He's with me then. And I feel happy. I feel grateful to have known him. That's a wonderful thing that we can pass on. And that makes me happy. It's the willingness and it's the connection.
Right.
That suddenly you realize you're in the right place and I'm willing to do this, take these steps.
Right. And I think it's important which groups you're in and which, there's a lot of meetings, and you have to find the one that makes sense for you and be around the people that make sense for you. It's not a one-size-fits-all situation.
You do, but it's in this, where we are here, I try to get people to take advantage of it. This is the best place in the world that I know of. New York is good.
Orange County?
Yeah, there's a lot of places that have pockets of enthusiasm, they call it. But around here, we have such a strong and huge recovery community that there's everything you'd possibly want. Every type of meeting that would float your boat. I've got a lot of people like to go to these meetings. There's a lot of yelling and screaming, and a lot of. I don't like to take the clients to that. People tend to get there late, leave early, not really meet anything. I like to take clients to meetings where somebody's going to challenge them, because I know a lot of people. I introduce them, and I want somebody to walk up to one of my clients and say, here's my number, call me tomorrow.
Right.
We're going to work the steps.
Right.
And if they do it, their life changes. But I want somebody to challenge them at the meetings. And I want people at the meetings to know that when I bring my people there, they want to go forward. They want to meet people, and they want to work the steps, and they want to get changed. So I tell people that one of the things that I tell people that's important is that treatment is not recovery.
Right. I was going to actually ask you about that. So, Joe's been talking a lot about AA, recovery, finding the right group, finding the right meeting, finding the right people. And that's really worked for Joe. As I mentioned, next Tuesday, he'll be 30 years sober. So that's been something that he's been able to build a lifelong sustainable sobriety through that daily effort and those meetings that he goes to and the relationships that he's built. But you over the last 10 years, you've also been involved in the treatment industry and have been in executive positions. And treatment and what we do here is evidence-based, acknowledging that mental health disorders and substance use disorders are medical conditions. And so in addition to the willingness and the readiness and all of the things that you mentioned, there's also the medical component, the clinical component, and a lot of things going into the treatment that creates this holistic treatment that encompasses all of these different things. So, I wanted to actually ask you, how would you define recovery versus treatment?
Well, there's a lot of differences. I mean, the idea, like I said, there's a difference between. I don't think that alcoholism and drug addiction are the same thing. I never have.
Right.
I think that alcoholism is something to do with brain chemistry. Alcohol affects me differently than it does my mother or my sister. It affects me differently, or than you.
Right.
You just get drunk and make a silly fool of yourself. But
I only need one drink.
I know that.
Yeah. I can't drink more than one or two. So.
I know that, but it affects me differently.
Right.
I keep drinking. I remember it was you and one of our other friends. We were in that hotel up on Newport Coast Road, or
Was it Pelican?
Pelican, yes.
Yeah,
We're
yeah.
at the Pelican. And you guys are having a glass of wine, because you can have a glass of wine.
Right.
You're normies. You guys are both having a glass of wine. One of you said to me, don't you ever just want a glass of wine? And I said, no, I really don't want
Right.
a glass of wine.
Right.
He said, oh, yeah, that's good. I'm glad you don't. I said, no, you don't understand. I don't want a glass of wine. I've never wanted a glass of wine.
Right.
I want all the wine.
Right.
And I want it right now. But if I drink one glass of wine, I'm going to drink all the wine they have.
Right.
And I'm going to get thrown out of here. And I'm going to keep drinking until, I have to come back.
Right.
It affects me differently than it does you.
Right.
You can have a few drinks and get silly, and the next day you're back at work. Me, if I start drinking, that's it. I don't know when I'm going to stop, ever. And alcohol is different than it is than drugs. We had this time. We were working together on a lot of this. We were doing this since there was just heroin. The opiate crisis is a
Right.
big deal.
Right.
The opiate crisis changed over the last 5 years. We had just heroin. That was a big deal. We had, we dealt with a lot of people. They'd run off, they had to go.
Yeah, I
And
mean, when we started 2014, that was a lot of clients we were seeing were dealing with that and,
Yeah.
and other drugs, and we weren't talking as much about fentanyl and some of these.
Oh, no, we
other
weren't.
things. Yeah.
What happened was all of a sudden there was all the pharmaceutical synthetic opiates,
Right.
like OxyContin. They were coming in, and all of a sudden we had all these people who were on OxyContin and then other new opiates that the doctors were prescribing like it was candy.
Right.
And they'd come in, and we had a lot of people, came in from all over the country. But most of those people just wanted, they'd gone to the doctor, they'd had an injury, they'd had some, and the doctor said, here, take this, you'll feel better.
Right.
They become physically and psychologically dependent on them, but they weren't true addicts. They
Right.
responded well to treatment.
Right.
We had a lot of people who responded well to treatment. That was a good time. We really, it was not a bad time with the clients we had. It was enjoyable. We felt successful.
Right.
Then somebody, they started screaming about this. They said that peanut gallery went crazy, that grandma's now an addict. And they started making the doctors stop, prosecuting the doctors, suing the pharmaceutical companies.
Right.
And all of a sudden it dried up. They couldn't get them. So this group of people, the people who really wanted it, they started going to the dealers. And then the dealers had this new demand that was huge. So they brought in, somebody's got the bright idea to pad the stuff with fentanyl.
Right.
Because it's so cheap
It
and
was
powerful.
cheap. Yep. Yep.
And they started making these bootleg pills. And the bootleg pills would kill you. And we told the clients, we said, if you try this stuff, if you go back out there and try heroin again, it might have fentanyl in it. If you go order a pill from Snapchat and get it, it might be fentanyl, and it might kill you because it's so incredibly powerful. And they, as a cohort,
Yeah,
said,
you don't even know what you're taking
no,
anymore.
but they, as a cohort, said, that sounds great. Give me some of that.
Right.
And so now nobody even calls it anything else but fentanyl. Nobody's pretending it's anything else anymore. It's the same stuff, and they're just.
Well, and even
using
now, there's
fentanyl.
even more. There's other synthetic
There
drugs
are.
that are even stronger than fentanyl.
There are,
that we're
and they're
seeing.
structurally unrelated. This is the new issue. They're structurally unrelated to fentanyl. We have increased penalties for having fentanyl. They're just selling it as fentanyl, but it's even more powerful, even more deadly. And if they get arrested with it, they say it's not fentanyl.
Right. There's a loophole.
Can't arrest me.
Right.
It's not even illegal because you never heard of it before. But so we're in a flux period right now. It's going to get worse. But the fentanyl just went crazy. You know what we've lost. You know who we've lost.
Yep.
The not just clients, but the
Coworkers.
the coworkers who we've lost to this. We never saw anything like that before. We never saw anything like that before.
I mean, you've had people that were sober for a long time, and then they just something happened. Physical, whatever the reason was. They had a brief relapse, and they died from that, right?
Yeah.
And it's in the past you would have it, and then you jump back on the wagon and kind of restart and kind of rebuild. But these days you might not get the opportunity.
No.
Excuse me, you might not get the opportunity to rebuild.
No, and Larry. When we had a lot of clients we'd lost, all of a sudden we were losing a lot of clients. That was hard. But then Larry and Marty.
Well, I mean, they weren't our clients at that time, but they were a lot of our alumni. People came through the program, did well, and then kind of went to the
former
next
clients,
step.
what I mean.
Former client, and then it was one of those things where it's like you develop these relationships with these people, and you are part of their recovery and their success, and then after some period of time when there's a relapse, they might not get that second chance. And so and what's even more ironic, Joe, is that, and this, is that even a lot of times people overdose and they wake up from that overdose. They didn't actually go through, so everyone around them goes through the experience, right? getting them Narcan, resuscitating them, calling the ambulance, getting them to the hospital. They wake up and they don't even remember what happened.
No, they just want to get high again.
And then they want to get high again. It's like, so you think, oh, I can't, you just overdosed. Like, I can't believe you want to do this again after what you went through. Everyone around them went through it. They didn't go through it. They just woke up from, they closed their eyes and they woke up. That type of,
Here's another thing.
Bizarre situation.
I can't tell you how many doctors, nurses, first responders who use Narcan have gotten punched in the mouth for using Narcan because they wake up in withdrawal.
Right.
And they're mad that you ruined their high.
What are you doing?
Yeah, what are you doing? I felt great before. But they did all this. I mean, we went through all this and we started getting this fentanyl, and then people started dying like crazy. But I was talking about this, and I've said this story several times. When we had just heroin, they would get antsy. We always had people who just weren't ready. They got antsy. We don't have locked doors. They can go. They have autonomy. So they'd leave. They'd come back a few days or a week later with some new arrows sticking out of their ass, some new war stories, and they'd start over again, and we'd do okay. Now they get antsy. Same thing. They get the urge to go out and try it one more time. Got to try it one more time, and they do, and they're dead in 24 hours.
Right.
That's what is killing us. I spent years before I got into this. You asked me how I got into this business, and I'll touch on that. I never wanted to be in the treatment business. You know that. I just really didn't want to be in the real estate business. And before that, I was in senior housing, specifically dementia care. I had a lot of post-grad training in dementia care, in neuroscience and cognitive psychology. A lot of post-grad training, and I was good at that. But you learn that. Nobody gets better in dementia care. They all go through this process of dying slowly. It's a hard thing to watch. It's a very difficult thing to watch. And then when the housing crisis hit, what is that, 2009? 2009. My marriage had broken up. My career had gone into the toilet. I came back down here and started over. And
But you didn't drink. You didn't. It didn't. So that's a good kind of. Let's touch on that real quick. So, earlier you talked about you almost lost everything in the mid '90s, and that's when you were drinking every day, and it almost led you to killing yourself. You dragged yourself out of that, and with AA and with other things that you did at that time, you maintained sobriety for since now. But so what was different? This time around, you're in the recession, 2009. What are you in your 50s? Early 50s. Years
sobriety, so yeah.
Right. You've got how much sobriety?
15 years.
15 years sobriety. You're back. You lost your wife. You got divorced. In 2009 recession, you were heavily involved in real estate. You lost everything there, and you had to start over again for the second time. After having a good run of success, a lot of times people would relapse. So what prevented that, and what kept you sober?
I'll tell you exactly what I did. I really was going back to basics. I mean, I'd lost everything. I didn't have much to do. I came back and moved back into my mother's house. Again, I'm an alcoholic. You're always welcome at mother's house if you're a good alcoholic. So I went back there, but my mother was older, a lot older, and I had 2 kids. They were smaller at the time, but they loved their grandma, and she loved them. They were her only grandkids, and she was older. She needed the help, and there wasn't anything else to do. There wasn't anything going on. It was a recession.
Right.
So we just took care of my mother, and the kids came down and spent a lot of time with her, and they got to do that, and we took care of her for several years. I didn't want to do that. That was not how I planned my life to be.
Right.
But it was needed. It was necessary.
But you were of service.
Yeah, it was needed. It was necessary, and I'm glad I had the opportunity to do it.
Right.
Without having a job keeping me busy.
Right.
So that was my job. But what I did was I started over like a newcomer. Did exactly what I did when I first got sober. I came back down here without drinking. I started the same places I went before. I stood at the door and greeted people, got to meet people, got reestablished in the same places, the same meetings that I established myself in before.
Right.
And I just kind of started over that way. And I spent years doing that until, you and I ran into each other, and we did what we did, and we built this place. But I didn't want to be in the treatment business.
Right.
But when I was in active in AA, we're not supposed to talk about that on press, radio, and films. When I was active in a 12-step program in Los Angeles, I didn't like the treatment business. They would come in, they'd bring a big van in, they'd always be rowdy, they'd be loud, they'd drink all the coffee and eat all the cookies, and they'd leave early. and never throw any money in the basket. We just, oh God, here they come again. You know, that's the attitude. Well, I had the opportunity to do something different. You know, in those first few years, when it was me driving in the van, and it was me spending the night with them and staying overnight. You know that when we first took over South Coast Counseling, and I'll go into that whole thing if you want to put it on tape, but when we first took over that 15-bed facility, and it filled up fast, we didn't have a staff. I was the staff.
Right.
So I just moved in for the first 4 months and drove the van. And you know, you and I would get in one of the vans and we'd go to Costco together and throw food in the car. We were always pretty sure we were going to be out of business the next month.
Right. It was 1 month at a time. We didn't know what we were doing.
Yeah.
That was back in 2014, 15.
Yeah. And I threw everybody in the van and said, we're going to the movies. We're going to a meeting. We're going to go get some food. And they would just get in the van and we'd go. I loved that time.
But we had a good program.
Yeah, we had a good program.
Yeah.
And then we had good psychologists, good teams. That was the difference between treatment and recovery, if we want to get into that real quick.
Well, that was the question.
Yeah, I'll get into that. They had the treatment, which was done by people who mostly aren't in the program. They're dealing with their insecurities. They're dealing with their trauma. They're dealing with the kind of things that lead them to get loaded, you know, and have led them into this life that they're in. Dealing with their family relationships, dealing with their connections, dealing with all these things that are not appropriate to deal with in the recovery community. They need to be dealt with by professionals. And we had the team of professionals who could do it and do it really well. And then on top of that, as an adjunct to that, as a milieu to put it into, we had the recovery community.
Right.
I tell people, professionally I'm agnostic as to where they're going to go. If they want to go to A, NA, CA, I don't care. Refuge recovery, smart recovery, celebrate recovery with Jesus, you know?
Right.
They can go anywhere they want to, as long as they find a community that they relate to. As long as they find a community they can be with for the rest of their lives, that will be a part of their lives forever.
Right.
But I do what I do, so I take them to where I go. And I had this discussion with Tarek once, I'll get into that later, that it's just you need to take them to one, because if we give them too many choices at that, they're going to use one against the other and not do anything.
Right.
We had an argument about that, but he was right. The thing was, he was right.
Yeah.
You know, I wanted to give him a better, bigger experience, and he said, no, you got to focus. Tarek was right. So we did that. That's what we did. But I'm trying to, on top of what the counseling team, the professional counseling team is going to do, and most of those, like I said, are not in recovery themselves. And I've always said, when say, well, they had this, you know, Dr. J, people like that, they're not Dr. J, Dr. Jolly.
Oh, Jolly.
Yeah.
Right.
She was. They'd say
She was one of our best. Yeah.
she was one of our best. People, she was beautiful and elegant. And what could she know about us? Who is she? Look at her. She doesn't understand us. And then a couple of days later, they're coming in. Is Dr. J here? No, she's not today. Can I help you? No, I got to talk to her. I got to talk to Dr. J. I just thought that was impressive. But you know, they're not in. The people are not in recovery who are doing that sort of thing mostly. But I always tell people that you don't have to have bad teeth to be a good dentist.
Right.
So they do a good job. They do what they do, but they're not going to prepare you for a long life of recovery.
I mean, the way I look at it, Joe, I mean, the difference between treatment and recovery is, you know, recovery is something that you are going to do for your whole life, and it involves, you know, being in a group where you have supportive friends and supportive colleagues who are kind of building the same thing, and you can talk to them, and you have your sponsors, and you have all that stuff going on. But it's something that, you know, is that connection, and it's something that's free, and it's not something that you need, you know, it's not a crisis stabilization. It's something that's, you do it on a day-to-day basis. It's like eating healthy every day, you know, brushing your teeth every day, making your bed every day. It's a life movement, right? And a day-to-day effort, right? And then treatment really is what we do, and we do that in a very intensive format, right? Whether it's detox residential, that's 30 days. Whether it's, you know, partial hospitalization, couple weeks. Whether that's an IOP, intensive outpatient program, that can be anywhere from, you know, 1 to 3 months. Whether that's outpatient, that could be anywhere from, you know, a few months. So when you're looking at treatment, you're looking at anything from a 1 week detox to a 90-day program to even 6 to 12 months of outpatient care, really depending on how motivated you are and how much aftercare you are participating in. But the idea behind it is that you have this group of people, and you mentioned it earlier. So it's not just about whether you're in recovery or you're not in recovery, or if you're normie or not normie. It's you've got, maybe you've got a psychologist or a LMFT or a social worker. You have some people who are KDACs. Those are certified addiction counselors. You have, behavioral techs. You have nurses. And so you have people with different skill sets, different life experiences, and different licensure that are coming together and providing you with a program that's diverse and can kind of attack this disease from multiple angles, right? So, helping people find a job, helping people get their IDs, helping people get back to school, get back to work. If they're older, kind of helping them reset. We have clients who are older, who are in their 40s, 50s, and they've already done all the, figuring things out at an earlier age, and they know how to build a resume and get a job and things like that. But for them, it's about how do you, kind of live day to day with these voices in your head that, you want to drink or you want to do drugs, but, filling that void inside. And there's always that void that it's hard to get rid of. And it's by community. It's based on these groups that we do, and really getting that diverse experience. So I feel like treatment is an area where you have evidence-based practices with a group of people who have different types of experience, who are going to help you for a period of time when you're really in the dark space, and help you get out of that and kind of work your way out of that. And specifically really dealing with a lot of the mental health issues related to it, right? I personally look at substance use as a subset of mental health. I don't look at it as this completely separate and isolated disorder. Based on all the experience we've had and all the professionals that have worked for us, is, mental health has a lot of different things. You might have anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation, bipolar. There's a lot of different, PTSD, trauma. Substance use is one of those. And sometimes substance use is, like you said, as an alcoholic, your brain was wired differently, and that needs to be attacked. And how do you work with somebody who's an alcoholic versus somebody who's a drug addict and who, or is, abusing or misusing or using substances in a way that's negatively impacting their life? And with that person, you need to really kind of peel the layers and onion, back and see, well, what happened to this person over the time, and things that they've just buried inside of them. Our staff and our clinicians and our team works with them to kind of get themselves out of their own way. A lot of times, clients have this preconceived notion that they're different, right? I'm older than the person in the group, or I'm different, or poor or rich or this or that. They all have the same thing in common. The common denominator is that they've dealt with things in their life, or they're dealing with things now, and there's this void, and there's this feeling that they feel can only be filled when they're high or when they're drinking. And it's to give them the tools to fill that void and to forward, we hit COVID. And I kind of want to fast forward to that because, you had, when COVID hit 2020, were both of your kids or one of your kids was in high school?
Parker was in high school.
Parker was in high school. So you had that experience.
And
but
my elder one's in college.
And so they were both in school. We've had a teen who's in high school. We have a young adult in college. And I kind of want to talk to the audience and kind of have you share your experience as a dad, and also happen to be somebody who's so knowledgeable about recovery and addiction and substance use and mental health. Because I think a lot of people out there are really suffering. They suffered through COVID, and that created a lot of other issues that we didn't have before. But now that we've had the opportunity to see that telehealth works, virtual treatment works, that there's more access to care, and that's what one of the things Ocean Rock does, is provide that access to care. Doesn't matter whether you're in a city or in a remote location, you can Zoom in, you can tune in, you can be around a group of people. So I think the next phase of the interview, the conversation, really, I want to shift it over to talking about young adults and teens, because I feel like right now those are the ages and those are the groups of people that are suffering the most based on all the things that they have to deal with. And I think you have a really good insight in that.
Well, let me tell you something. I'm going to get to this in a bit of a roundabout way. One of the things you brought up that I need to touch on is mental health issues. You know, I was 15 years in recovery and before I got into this business. One of the things that always bothered me about the 12-step world is that there's a lot of people, not everybody, it's not all widespread, but a lot of people say, you know, they think that it's going to cure everything.
Right.
And stay away from those crazy psychologists and psychologists that don't take any psych meds. I had a friend, a good friend, who actually, and this is before I got into this, while I was still in the dementia world, I had a good friend who literally went crazy on Facebook. Everybody knew about it. He was acting like a nut. And people would tell him, go to more meetings, talk to your sponsor more. And I was saying, he doesn't need a meeting, he needs a straitjacket. And he was a veteran. And I had one other good friend, he was down in San Diego, this guy, a good friend of ours from living in Prescott, Arizona, drove from Prescott, Arizona to San Diego, grabbed him, threw him in the car and took him back to Phoenix and threw him in the VA hospital in Phoenix. Well, the VA let him go in 2 days. He got on a bus back to San Diego, got off in Barstow, I think it was, and hung himself.
Wow.
From a chain link fence. And I was furious. I was really, really angry. This is long before I got into this. I was really angry that people were saying, don't go get mental health help. I was pissed off at him, and I yelled at a lot of people over it because I said, he did not need what we have to offer here. He needed real help from professionals. And he died because he didn't get it, because people told him not to go get it.
Right.
And that made me really mad. We know we're in a mental health crisis. We've been talking about the mental health crisis. It's in all the news. And one of the things that, they talk about this is addicts. A lot of people begin using drugs because they're masking something else. You know, we don't really do a psychiatric evaluation on our clients until they're out of detox, because they come in, everybody shows up with some level of mental health issues displayed. But we find out that after detox, they either get a lot better real quick or they get a lot worse real quick.
Right.
And then we find
most of them get worse.
Yeah, but if they get really worse, really like
in terms of not worse, but it's, you know, now the mental health stuff starts, you know.
Yeah, and when they begin decompensating, we sometimes have to move them to a higher level of care because they were self-medicating.
Right.
The ones that start getting, they start getting less paranoid, they start getting less angry, they start getting more able to live in the world, then you know, we know that they're in the right place. But we need to work through these issues with them and get them ready to go to a program, a 12-step program or something like that, whoever it is, that's going to be there for the rest of their lives. But you can't go into that with all these mental health issues and expect that to cure it. It won't.
Right.
And the book we use it says, seek professional help when you need professional help. And that's what we do. We provide that level of professional help. We do it to get them ready for all this. And if they need more, we can't do anything in 90 days. We can triage. We can't deal with complex trauma. We can tell that there's complex trauma. We can tell them and let them know that they have stuff to deal with they're going to be dealing with for many, many years.
Right.
And put them on a course where they can get that help. And that has to be parallel to their recovery.
Right.
You know, this is a mental health journey too. You talk about the telehealth. And what interests me about that is that how many times, I've seen it so many times, you probably have too. We used to talk to the clients in the beginning.
Right.
We were taking the calls,
right,
you know, from these people. And how many of them have said, you know I need help, but got my kids, got my job, got this, I can't go I can't go for 3 months away from here.
Right.
I can't do that, you know, and they keep saying, I know I got to do it, I'll do it next week, I'll do it next month.
Right.
And how many times has next month never gotten there?
Right.
They finally just are gone, you know? And what the idea of telehealth offers them is they don't have an excuse anymore.
Right.
You know, this access has gotten so widespread that, you know, they may not be, some of them are right, you know, they can't afford childcare, some of them can't. Some of them can't, they might have
it gives you the flexibility and the ease of access, you know, and it gives an opportunity for a lot of people that could normally not be able to do it to be able to do it.
Yeah, because there are people who have their own job. They're a tradesman, or they run a company, or they open a store, you know, and
right,
it's hard on them. So if they don't work, they don't have any money.
Right.
So they have to keep working. But anybody can afford a few hours a night for, you know, a few nights a week for a period of time. If they can't afford that, they need to seriously reevaluate their lives.
Well, I think it's, you know, in terms of affordability, again, it's something that's covered by insurance. Of course, there's deductibles and other things, but it's it's something that they don't have to go 100% out of pocket for, right? It's
No.
I think that's an important thing for a lot of people to know, is that depending on what type of insurance they have and the type of facility that they go to, some of that is covered, sometimes all of it is covered, just really case by case basis. And so you have that allows the affordability. And then the second thing is, because they already have some form of housing, they're looking at just getting the treatment side of it, whether it's 1 hour a day, 3 hours a day. Our IOP program is 3 hours a day, can be as little as 3 days a week, can be up to 5 days a week. And you give that flexibility. Somebody might be just doing outpatient, they might be doing an hour once or twice a week. The idea is that you have an aftercare plan, or if you're going in it from the beginning and just focusing on that outpatient level, you have an opportunity to find groups and find a program that works for you, that you can build around your life, right? And so you can still function and do your day-to-day things, but have this thing that you can kind of rely on and hope and really kind of be excited for. Hey, next week I've got this group with this guy, and this is what we're going to talk about. And then you go to your family and say, hey, I just had this group and we talked about this, and these other people were going through this. And I feel like the conversations that I've had with clients that are in the program, one of the biggest takeaways is that because we so focus on mental, it's not just about addiction, right? So some people might have a substance use issue, some people might just dealing with mental health. We have different tracks for different types of people and different types of situations. But the common denominator is that these are people who have families, have jobs, have other things, or they might be in the process of getting those things, right? Everyone's at a different phase, but what they all have in common is that they're going through something. And by doing that together, and by doing that in a safe environment with a professional leading and guiding them, it can really change somebody's life.
It can change somebody's life. And, everybody has just the process of being an addict and dealing with that is going to cause trauma. Mm-hmm. It's going to cause mental health issues. It's going to cause stuff that just not using your drugs anymore is not going to help. It's going to make you nuts. You got to deal with those things.
Right.
And they need to find a professional way to do it, and that's what we specialize in, to get them ready to have the comfortable life of living in recovery. Right. And that's a good thing to do. But we've been talking about this mental health. How many times we had to? They start so young, and it destroys their ability to grow. Right. How many times we explained to somebody who didn't know how to make a bed, didn't know how to use a laundry machine, right. Didn't know how to do what. We had to convince them that a Hot Pocket is not a balanced meal. We had to teach these people things that we learned, right. Even as kids, that most people learn and take for granted. They didn't learn these things. They were like feral. Right. And that's one of the challenges, right? So you're dealing with a population and especially an age group that they're dealing with all this stuff, the mental health issues, the addiction issues, and then they also are having this failure to launch. Mm-hmm. And so you see that with even people who don't have mental health or drug addiction, and it's such a challenge. People are staying in their homes for a lot longer, staying with their parents. Things are expensive. Real estate's expensive. I mean, just the whole cost of living has gone up so high, and there's so much pressure on everyone. And let alone you have that, and you have to deal with that, plus you have to deal with mental health, addiction, and other disorders. It's all changing. I've written about this. I had 2 kids in high school and college. They grew up with me, and they're 21 and 23 now. Something happened back when they were in high school. Something different happened to them. And I was talking to their friends. I was always active with their friends. I was the dad they wanted to talk to, and I was proud of that. But I listened to these kids. One of the things with my son, who's 21 now, that I noticed was that he'd have his headphones on, he'd have his thing in front of him, and if I put the headphones on and looked at it, it was white noise to me. But he can understand it. He understood exactly what was going on. He was having multiple conversations at the same time. Now, we're told by cognitive psychologists, I've had training, that we're not really able to multitask. We can only do one thing at a time. Right. They can. Right. Something is different about their brains, and it happens they're like under 25 right now. Something changed, and I think it was a seismic shift in evolution. I think they're a different species than came before them, because a psychologist good friend of mine talks about digital immigrants and digital natives. They're the digital natives. They grew up with an iPad before they had a stuffed animal.
That's our kids.
Yeah, that's our kids.
Right.
We had to learn this stuff,
Right.
like learning a new language,
Right.
and we had to grow into it. So we have this thing, and their attitudes on things, for the most part, are so much different. They look at the kind of things going on in the world today, the kind of things that make liberals like me get crazy, and but they don't. It's not that they reject it; it's they don't comprehend that a person could feel that way, could think that way. They just it sounds like the grunting of cavemen to them, and I think they're a different species entirely. But we know that we're in the middle of a mental health crisis for them. It's a difficult time for them. The world is frightening to
Right.
people, and it's been frightening since I talked about this a long time ago. It's been frightening for a long time. But 2009, the big recession that put a lot of parents out of work, a lot of people out of work for a long time. A lot of people lost their homes, and a lot of people lost all their comfort, their sense of safety. When they're little children
Right.
at the time,
Right.
they lost their sense of safety, and it's just taken away from them. And they have to deal with this, and we don't have the skills to make them feel safe. We don't have the skills, we do, but their parents don't, and they end up using these drugs, and they get dropped into this whole thing, and it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy that they're not safe, that they're not, there's so much abuse, and there's so much exploitation of young addicts.
Right.
We've dealt with this. We deal with them when they're over 18. But I've heard horror stories. I've heard so many horror stories. They would break your heart. And if we can work on them younger, if we can get a hold of them younger, I'll back up a second. I didn't go to treatment.
Right.
You know that.
Right.
30 years ago, treatment was, the insurance companies didn't pay for it very much, a little bit, but not much. And it was expensive. And I couldn't afford it. I didn't go to treatment. People say, oh, well, if you did it, I can do it. You must be some kind of, it can't be that hard. It was miserable. It was terrible. It was 1 minute at a time of just holding on to my seat until I finally felt better. It was months of that. If I could have spent that time in a place where I had people taking care of me, people to talk to, people to keep me from going out the door, to get that bottle that was just down the street. It took me 10 years, well, 6 years, to get that, because every time I'd try, I'd sit there and then I'd give up and run out to get the bottle. If I was in a place where they would sit on me and teach me the things that I needed to know and take me to the places that I needed to go and be around me 24 hours a day, it would have been one heck of a lot easier.
Right.
I was not a hero. I was a miserable, miserable person. I'm just lucky that it worked. But now we've got these kids, and there's so much access now that there's no excuse for them not to be getting better. And we can deal with this. We can offer them something that they can't find anywhere else. The schools can't offer it.
Right.
The schools are stretched to the limit. The schools are stretched to the limit. The families are stretched to the limit. The families are trying to keep a roof over their heads, but they've got insurance. They've got a way to do it, and there's no excuse for not getting this young person into a place where they can learn about how to navigate life.
Right.
Where they can be made to feel safe and understand that escaping there are other ways to escape and work.
And then the family needs to get involved too. I mean, you said earlier that you had when your kids were in high school, a lot of their friends felt comfortable talking to you. Now it just happens that you know what you're talking about. Not everyone knows what they're talking about, right? And so, I think it's an opportunity for the family and for the young teen to be able to talk in that professional setting, but also have the ability to do the group. I think I really like the group counseling. And I think that's kind of the difference between therapy and kind of treatment is that, therapy is one-on-one and there's a lot of value to that. Or you can even have family therapy. But with the group with the treatment programs we have, you have that in addition to having the family therapy and the individual therapy, that's part of the program. But in addition to that, you also have, if it's the teens, you have somebody who can kind of help with homework and guidance and kind of help with the educational component. For the young adults, we have people who are helping them get into colleges or filling out applications, helping them find jobs if they don't want to go to college, starting an early career. And so it's that. And then in addition to that, you have group counseling. You've got other people that are going through the same things that you do and able to share that and see that you're not alone. And I think that feeling that you're not alone and the ability to work with others and have this kind of holistic, comprehensive program. That's what it takes to get somebody through that initial hurdle. And then you can deal with, aftercare and sustainability after that.
My answer to that is all of the above.
Right.
I mean, a lot of places, one thing we've been really good at is providing real comprehensive care, providing covering all those bases. A lot of people say if they offer group counseling and individual counseling and taking to a meeting, they think they're being comprehensive. They think they're being holistic. Because they don't understand how these things have to relate to one another.
Right.
They have to be
I think integrated is better than
integrated and related, and how one of the things, because one of the things I've always been a big advocate for case management.
Yes.
I always like to talk because I did it. I was the only one dealing with these people for 18 hours a day for a long time, and I would deal with them 18 hours a day. The team would deal in the other 6 hours or 8 hours, and I learned what was going on in their lives. I knew how they were going to meetings. I knew what was going on with each other in their interpersonal relationships inside the house. I knew what was going on with their interpersonal relationships with their families. And I would relate that to the people who needed to know, could help them with the problems they had. That was, it was creating a web and a communication between the people who are supplying the care, so that nothing was happening in a vacuum. Everything was related to something else. If they were talking with a psychologist, it was about something that had happened, and something that somebody had observed, me usually, that needed work. And that's the way I've always tried to make it. I've always tried to have a lot of communication and a lot of respect for case managers, because they're the ones who get the most comprehensive look at what's going on in their lives. But we need to have a comprehensive approach. We know that, but we've always done a good job at that. And it's not just because we're really well educated about it. We are. It's not just because we got a really good team. We do, but it's because we experienced it. We had the experience of knowing how providing that level of communication between the different factors, between their doctor, their counselor, their psychologist, and all the people in their family too, and each other, is what made it better for them.
Right. I mean, communication is the most important thing, I think, in any scenario, right? It's the lack of communication and the unwillingness to engage in uncomfortable discussions that a lot of times leads to problems escalating and becoming, really untenable. And so I think one thing that we, definitely in the moment, you're going to have an agreement, disagreement. You might disagree with somebody else's modality, or even in a work setting and work environment, you have disagreements. And I think a lot of times people, when they deal with that, they don't know how to come out of it because it's just too uncomfortable. And so they either don't advocate for themselves, or they don't bring it up, or it becomes really to the point where they just kind of avoid somebody. And so that might be something that happens for a few days. I mean, that's sometimes unavoidable. And sometimes you really need to take a few days and step away from the situation in order to process it, in order to reflect, in order to kind of cool yourself down. Because if you're just engaged in a moment where, or right after a disagreement or some type of dispute, it's not going to get anywhere. We've only seen that, whether it's text or emails or whatever it is, it just escalates, and then all of a sudden it's like, what just happened? But it's the willingness and the kind of self-awareness that take a step back and think about it, and then re-engage with that person and really kind of listen to them, but also share with them how you went through that, right? Because a lot of times people are so focused on their own feelings that they forget that the person on the other side also has feelings. It doesn't matter if they're in a different position, whether it's higher or lower, or different industry or different field, or even within a company or within a relationship, right? So I think that's one key takeaway. And, you mentioned, I kind of wanted to drill down on this, kind of go back to, because you said, it was your kids when they were in school, you would kind of listen in and you kind of couldn't connect with, it seemed like white noise to you. You couldn't connect with some of the things that they were dealing with. But then as a parent who really loves their kids and wants to be highly involved in their kids, you didn't just disengage, right? You were committed to being part of their life, whether that made them comfortable or uncomfortable, right? And I think that's one of the things that we've touched on before, is that as a parent, yes, we want to be friends with our kids, and yes, we want to, hang out with our kids, and we want them to like us. But more important than that, you have to have the respect from your kids and the love from your kids. And love and respect doesn't just come from giving them what they want. Sometimes it comes from being very disciplined with them and holding the boundaries. And they don't realize it in the moment, but they eventually do. And so I kind of want to touch on what you did as a parent with kids that were in school during the 2000. What years were your kids in high school?
Well, Parker lived with me from 2017 to 21 when he graduated.
Right.
And then he went off to UC Davis.
So yeah, that's very recent, right? I think a lot of people at home listening have kids that are in school right now, or they're in college, they're in high school. I think a lot of parents don't know what to do. I think they don't know what to look for. They don't know how to engage in the conversations. And there's a lot of kids that are using drugs or dealing with this suicidal thoughts, dealing with just not feeling comfortable in their own skin. And I think parents just don't have the tools on how to deal with that. And I think that's where Ocean Rock or some other programs really can benefit them, because that's something that we do together, right? That's something that we kind of work through together. But as a parent who understands the field of mental health and addiction treatment, but also understands what it's like to just have kids who went through adolescence and are in young adulthood, how do you put both of those experiences together and really speak to the audience and say, how can you help them, and what are some tips and tools that you could give them to kind of figure things out in those situations?
Well, it didn't matter that I didn't understand the white noise. That doesn't matter. That I don't understand what my kid is listening to. What matters is I understand that he understands it. What matters is that I understand that his friends are doing the same way. I've told this story. I think it's pretty funny. When my kid was in high school, he was pretty popular. Kids would come over to my place all the time. And I sometimes just leave a big box of urine cups on the dining room table. They'd walk in and go, "Are those drug tests?" I say, "Yes. I buy them by the crate, and I've got all your parents' permission." But they knew somebody was watching.
Right.
They knew somebody cared.
Holding them accountable.
Yeah. They knew somebody was watching. They knew somebody was scared. Cared about.
Now,
what
I'm
they
sure
did.
you didn't make them do that.
No, but they would come. No, of course not. But I didn't need to.
No, I know. I think
But
it was
if
just
they had a question.
It was
about
just the idea that you've talked to their parents. Hey, this is something that if there's any suspicion, we're not just going to let you guys do whatever you want. There's going to be some accountability.
Yeah, but also it's that because I could talk to my son, and my son could talk to me, and his friends found out they could talk to me. It's a matter of listening. It's a matter of if they have a question about this, they can come to somebody who will tell them the truth.
Right.
And care about them.
Right.
And care that they're okay. Like I said, these kids are very, very smart. They're smarter than we were.
Right.
A lot smarter.
Right.
And they have their perceptions are and their ability to perceive is, I think, greater. Their ability to I don't know, using more of the brain. I don't know what it is, but they see things we don't think they see. And they're scared. It's a scary world, And if they can talk to somebody about that and say, "This frightens me. I don't know what I'm going to do about it," and we can listen to them and try to make. And you don't have to tell them it's going to be better. Just we're going to all work together to fix it. And I've always got your back. That's usually enough to keep them on straight. But if they don't, there's going to be somebody who's got some drugs for them.
Right.
And they're going to try it. Some kids are, they just don't care about it. They don't want the drugs. They don't like it. They just want to be normal, and they do really well. Some kids also grow up.
But it's not just the drugs. I mean, there's kids
not drugs.
there's kids that might not do drugs, but
No, that's what I'm saying.
they're still thinking about, maybe they're on Instagram, they're on this, they're on social media, they're kind of looking at these pictures and these videos of people having this type of life, and they're like, well, I don't have that, or I don't look like that, or there's so much self-consciousness.
Oh, I know.
And
Body image.
I think what was the statistics we were looking at? Around 25% or more of teens have thought about suicide.
Yeah.
I mean, those numbers are just staggering, and I haven't, the last decade, the numbers have gone up. Just to like the fentanyl epidemic and the deaths that we see every day from addiction have gone up.
Well, you raise a good point.
The suicidal thoughts and the mental health disorders and the uncomfortableness in one's own skin at such an early age. And then there's so much things in the media that says, yeah, you do this or do that, or this is who you are, this is, how you should identify. And frankly, you got to give these kids some time to figure it out on their own without all this influence and without all this just manipulation from the media and from other sources.
Well, you raise a good point. I mean, the fact is, they can perceive, they can understand a lot of things going on around them, but the information flow to them is so much greater than it was when we were that age. I mean, it's like a fire hose compared to the garden hose we used to sip from. The information coming to them, and then the misinformation and the judgment that comes into them is, it affects their body image. It affects their relationships, their ability to have relationships. What kind of my boyfriend should love me more than he does.
Right.
My boyfriend, I should look better for my boyfriend. I should look better for my girlfriend. My girlfriend thinks I'm stupid.
Right.
All these things they're hearing, and it affects them, and they don't know how to process it. So we do process groups. We have, but they need to have. And that's why Camille's doing the family groups, which are great. I love the family groups. We used to be really good at that, and we still do it.
Right.
We need to really involve the families in this. It's a family disease.
And the family groups we do is, that's open to the whole public. It's, obviously it's our families of our clients. Everything's confidential, HIPAA compliant, but it's really open to any family. And it's a free resource. It's something that really people who have been, you've had parents and especially moms who have been holding things inside for decades, for years. And they just feel comfortable in that environment and they start sharing, and it's just such a cathartic release.
Yeah.
And it really does. And Camille was on the show recently, and she's just somebody that's so lovable and has gone through so much and has so much she can share and really uplifts a lot of people. And so her running that group and kind of the families getting involved, that's a beautiful thing that we've seen.
Camille's one of the dearest people in my life.
It is. And, it actually makes me think, because we were talking about, the young adults, we're talking about the teens, what they're going through. And one thing that's really interesting, and I've talked to a lot of people recently about this, is, and I'm sure it's, across the United States, but I can talk about our area. We're in, Orange County, we're near Newport Beach, Costa Mesa. And there's a lot of wealthy people here. There's a lot of people who, from all walks of life, successful. And it's not about, this disease, whether it's mental health or addiction, is not about, it doesn't discriminate. It doesn't matter if you're rich or poor. It attacks at the same level of intensity. And people think, well, okay, if you have money, well, even if you don't have money, you can have access to care based on insurance and other things. So the access to care is there as long as you're willing to take it. But what I've noticed, Joe, and I want you to, because a lot of people, is there's a lot of moms and dads, whether it's a successful dad who's really busy with work and doesn't have time to kind of spend time with the kids, or even if they do have time, but they're so stressed out and there's so much, there's just so much responsibility that they have, that they might be dealing with certain things and not really sharing it because they don't feel that, they don't want people to know that they're vulnerable and they're going through it. And then the moms who, and they could be working, they could be have successful careers. So when I say moms, I'm not talking about just a stay-at-home mom. I'm talking about, it could be a working mom, could be a stay-at-home mom, it could be somebody who is highly successful in their own career or just really busy with the household, but they're suffering, and they might be drinking or they might be doing drugs, or even if they're not, they're self-medicating in one way or another, and they feel that void and just they're giving so much to other people. They're helping the kids, they're helping the husband, they're doing all this, and I feel like moms to me is the most important person in our life. The dads are super important. We're both dads, but it's the mom that's really the rock of the family and kind of holds things together. And when the mom feels that it's really overly burdensome and they don't know who to talk to because they don't want people to know what's going on, I think that's where we need to have a safe place. And I think Ocean Rock is a good example of a safe place where, hey, it doesn't mean you're going to a group. You're in a group of other people talking about your feelings and trying to get through it. You're doing that from home, so you don't have to physically go somewhere. You don't have to. You tell the family, hey, for 1, 2, 3 hours, I have to step aside and deal with this for my own mental health and kind of for my own self-care. And we really provide the platform and opportunity to do that. And so, I kind of wanted to get your reflection on, as a parent who was talking to these kids who felt comfortable talking to you, what were you, how come they couldn't talk to their own parents?
Well, one of the things that you touched on is a pretty wealthy area. But in this day and age, especially since the recession and things, living in a wealthy area often takes, and raising kids and having a house, takes two incomes,
Right. Sometimes more.
Sometimes more. It takes two incomes, and that just takes time away from everything. And the trouble is, every kid, every preteen, everyone that goes, they have, as they're budding, as they're going through puberty, and their bodies are changing, they have these insecurities. They're just a natural thing. You wonder how the other kids are.
Right.
Why I'm not why I don't have the same body the other kids have.
Right.
Why I don't have the same
People
friends the other
develop
kids.
differently.
People develop differently. So they're loaded with insecurities. The assault on their insecurities now is far more dangerous than it ever was. I mean, just like an order of magnitude.
Right.
Now it's the fire hose of information coming at them, and everything they've got to compare themselves against in this media world. And we talk about their ability to perceive all this stuff. Well, it all goes into their heads.
Right.
And they don't know what to do with it. And if their parents are not able to deal with that themselves, and the parents,
they're too busy.
But the kids, the parents of these small kids aren't the old stoic people from the World War II veterans, the kind of things that our parents, you hear that it's an old trope.
Just
really.
tough it out.
Yeah, it's an old trope of the father who doesn't know how to show his affection.
Right.
That's not us. We're not like that. We can show the affection.
We show too much.
Yeah, too much. But that's not us. That's not the way we do it. But being able to show affection is one thing.
Right.
Being able to listen and hear and relate and have the time to do that is another thing entirely.
Right.
And,
you hit the nail on the head.
So we have, all these things. Is this assault on their innate insecurities?
Mm-hmm.
It's like it's never been before. So we have a chance to redirect all that. We have a chance to do so much good in all this. I'm excited about the idea of adolescent mental health.
Right.
We've talked about this for a long time. We have these crises. One of the things we've done, over here, and I'm pretty proud of it, is that we respond well to a crisis. We've done the things that were needed in a crisis because we can react quickly. We can adjust quickly. We're not one of these big monolithic places that runs through the whole country where they have a way of doing things and it doesn't change. Well, that's the problem.
Right.
The world has changed, and it's changed a lot. And we've been able to react to it. And we've been able to learn from what we learned in the past and carry something forward in the future and how we react to this new world and how it's affecting the people that we treat. And that's what's happened. If you don't recognize that it's a different world than it was when I was a teenager, when a 30-year-old was a teenager. It's a different world than it was. And it's a much scarier world. And we have to provide a safe space for these people. But also, there's a couple of things that as a takeaway. How much more time do we have?
We ran out of time, so we're in overtime right now, Joe.
One of the things that has to be addressed is that it's a scary world. It's been a scary world. We have to understand that drug abuse, mental health, all these things are related in a way because they're going to some core problem in a person's psyche.
Right.
They're a reaction in some way to some core problem. And we have to focus on that core problem. And then we deal with the other things.
Right.
We focus on those, then we can get them into not just a world of recovery, but we can get them ready to go into a world of recovery, and we can give them a direction to spend a lifetime, if it takes it, as many years as it takes to follow up and deal with these other mental health issues, especially complex trauma.
Right.
That's a big deal. That's what we deal a lot of that these days.
Yeah, trauma's huge. And we had Allison, our clinical director, on the show a few weeks ago, and she was talking about trauma, and that really resonated with a lot of people. I think a lot of people are dealing with unresolved trauma, and we have different modalities to treat that, whether it's EMDR, which is very popular and it's very intensive, but it actually works very quickly. It's like a bunch of therapy sessions in one, and we have other modalities as well. But yeah, I think you were kind of alluding to the fact that the kids have really you called it a fire hose, but they are dealing with so many things now at such a high volume, right? The access to information and really misinformation. And I think same with the parents, right? And I think that was one of the things that, part of the reason bringing you on the show, bringing other people that are, knowledgeable in these areas on the show, is that we want to be a resource, for people who want more information, right? And so you could be watching the show, if you're on YouTube, subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can see the full length video. You might be seeing a clip on Instagram or other social media channels. Eventually you might be in the car ride, driving to work. You can listen to it on Spotify, Apple Podcast. But to me, the ultimate point and the whole reason we're doing this is so we can so people can feel comfortable that the information that they hear here is from reliable sources, which it is. And in addition to that there's, if they need more help or if they have more questions, we have a whole team of people that are waiting to jump on the phone to talk to you guys. And so, if it's a family member, if it's the person going through it themselves, and you have any questions, feel free to reach out. Today we've talked about Joe's history, how he became sober, how he kept his sobriety, how he has sustained his sobriety, dealing with his kids and helping his kids get through high school, get through college, dealing with all kinds of mental health and addictions and different types of disorders in the community. And ultimately, I think Joe really shined a light on the benefits of treatment, the differences between treatment and recovery, the benefits of both, and the fact that each of those things should respect and acknowledge each other. And what we hope to do on future episodes is to dive deeper in some of these topics. Joe has actually a really interesting story that I'm not going to talk about today, but it's with his son and the things that he went through himself. Obviously, one day, if Joe and his son want to come back on the show, we can talk about that. But there's a lot more interesting topics that we're going to address and really kind of dive into all the things that everyone's going through these days. So, Joe, thanks for coming on the show.
One of the other things I want to say, real quick.
Got one more thing?
One more thing. We talk about being a resource, and we are a resource. If somebody wants to find out about us, we're out there. They can look at the Facebook, they can look at the Instagram, they can look at our YouTube channel.
Right.
They can come on the family group and find out about us before then. If they think that we can help them, they probably will. Then they can get in touch with us.
Right.
But we're out there providing information because we think it needs to be let out. We need people to hear what we have to say.
Right. Yes, we want to remove the stigma around the conversation. We should feel comfortable talking about these topics. And more specifically, if you have questions that or need help, we're here and our team is here to help. Thanks, Joe.
Thank you, Tom.